Have you ever wondered why some empaths spend their entire lives offering love, understanding, and forgiveness until suddenly something inside them dies? It is not a physical death. It is much deeper. It is the silent disappearance of that version that endured everything, justified everyone, and believed that its goodness would be enough to transform people's hearts. When that moment comes, those who observe from the outside usually say that the empath has changed, hardened, or lost its light. But Carl Jung would see this event differently. For him, no true transformation is born of chance. It begins when the soul, exhausted from carrying an invisible weight, decides that it can no longer continue living in the same way. There is a truth that few are prepared to accept. The psyche never forgets. Every word that hurt and remained unanswered, every betrayal that was forgiven before it was understood, every limit violated in the name of peace, every manipulation accepted to avoid conflicts, everything remains alive in the depths of the unconscious. Jung dedicated his life to showing that what we repress does not disappear. It just descends into deeper regions of the soul, where it continues to act silently until it finds the right moment to emerge. It is precisely at this point that the journey of the empath begins. Not as a victim of fate, but as someone called to face what he has avoided all his life: the shadow itself. The empath usually believes that his greatest strength lies in the ability to understand the other. He feels the pain of others as his own, seeks to justify destructive behavior, and offers countless opportunities for those who show regret, even when that regret never turns into change. Your heart remains open as your energy is depleted. Manipulators recognize this disposition even before the empath himself realizes it. They identify their difficulty in saying no, their need to preserve relationships, and their tendency to carry guilt that never belonged to them. Without realizing it, the empath transforms his greatest virtue into a door constantly open to people who have learned to explore exactly what is most precious in their nature. Carl Jung said that what we resist gains strength over us. As long as the empath insists on denying its indignation, its ability to confront, and its legitimate need for protection, these energies do not disappear. They just retreat into the shadow, waiting for the moment when they will inevitably be summoned. This process is not a punishment. It is an attempt by the psyche itself to restore the lost balance. The soul cannot bear to remain divided forever. There comes a time when excess of light produces blindness, and goodness, when it does not find wisdom, turns into self-destruction. Maybe you've felt it without being able to explain it. A fatigue that does not disappear with rest. A strange emptiness after helping someone who never recognized his effort. A silent sadness when realizing that there is always someone more willing to receive than to offer. These feelings don't arise just because you've met the wrong people. They can represent something much bigger. Jung stated that every deep crisis has a symbolic dimension. When the old way of living stops working, it does not mean that its essence has failed. It means that a new stage of individuation is trying to be born. It is at this moment that many empaths experience what seems to be a collapse. The tears subside. The automatic impulse to please begins to fade. Silence becomes more frequent. People used to consuming their energy start asking what happened. Some claim that you have become cold. Others say he has lost his sensitivity. But is it really? Or have they just lost access to the person who has always been willing to sacrifice their own peace? For Jung, authentic transformation never happens only on the surface. It reorganizes the entire structure of the personality. When an old pattern ceases to serve the growth of the soul, it must die so that another can take its place. This process is frightening because it breaks the identity built over years. The empath fails to recognize himself. A strange sensation of being between two worlds arises. The old one no longer exists. The new has not yet been fully understood. It is precisely in this crossing that many believe they are losing their own essence, when, in reality, they are approaching it for the first time. The esoteric tradition has always described this moment as an initiation. Analytical psychology offers another language for the same phenomenon. The descent into the unconscious does not represent a fall, but an encounter. It is in the regions where fears, wounds, and repressed impulses dwell that the soul finds the necessary strength to stop surviving and finally start living. The shadow, so feared by many, does not appear to destroy the empath. It arises to prevent it from continuing to be destroyed. However, there is a question that completely changes the course of this journey. If the shadow is not the enemy, then who is the mysterious figure who begins to awaken when the empath finally refuses to continue bleeding to feed the handlers? Carl Jung believed that every great transformation awakens an archetype capable of leading consciousness to a new level of existence. And it is precisely this archetype, misunderstood for centuries and shrouded in symbols, that will begin to reveal its true meaning from now on. Stop for a moment and remember someone who came into your life doing exactly everything you ever dreamed of finding. Maybe it was a friendship that seemed sincere, a relationship that promised security, or even a family member who said they understood her sensitivity. At first, everything seemed harmonious. You offered attention, listened for hours, postponed your own appointments to be there whenever that person needed it. Gradually, without realizing it, their needs began to disappear, while the needs of the other became an absolute priority. When you finally felt the weight of fatigue, it was enough to hear an apology or a sad story for you to open the door of your heart again. How many times did this happen before you noticed the pattern? Carl Gustav Jung stated that consciousness rarely awakens through comfort. It awakens when illusions cease to sustain reality. This is precisely why true growth almost always begins with deep disillusionment. Not because life has decided to be cruel, but because the soul can no longer continue to feed stories that hide the truth. There is a moment when the empath stops seeing only what he would like to be true, and begins, even if against his own will, to perceive what has always been in front of his eyes. It is at this point that one of the most misunderstood archetypes of analytical psychology emerges. For centuries, the figure of the witch has been associated with fear, persecution, and destruction. However, Jung saw archetypes as universal expressions of the psyche, living forces that emerge when certain stages of inner evolution require a different response from consciousness. The witch does not represent evil. It represents knowledge. It represents the ability to see that which remains hidden beneath the surface of appearances. It is the part of the soul that no longer accepts to live only by hope when the facts point in another direction. Perhaps this idea causes discomfort. After all, those who have spent their entire lives trying to be a good person hardly want to identify with a symbol that culture has made synonymous with danger. But look carefully. The real question has never been whether the witch is good or evil. The question is another. Why does this archetype awaken when the empath reaches the limit of its own pain? Jung believed that every personality has dormant potentialities waiting for the right moment to manifest itself. As long as balance exists, these forces remain silent. However, when the soul realizes that a certain way of living threatens its integrity, it summons exactly the energy capable of restoring this balance. It is not a rational choice. It is a deep movement of the psyche itself. The empath believes that it is changing. In reality, he's letting a forgotten part of himself finally participate in his own existence. Imagine someone walking for years through a forest shrouded in thick fog. This person learns to recognize trees only by their contours, interprets sounds without ever discovering their true origin, and believes he knows the path because he has never seen beyond a few meters ahead. One day, the fog disappears. The forest remains exactly the same. The trees have not changed. The trails remain in the same place. The only element that is different is the clarity of vision. This is what happens when the witch archetype awakens. The world does not change suddenly. It is the eyes of the empath that are no longer driven only by the desire to believe. You've probably experienced a similar situation. Perhaps someone made a promise that seemed absolutely sincere. The words were beautiful. The gestures were convincing. His heart told him to trust. However, something almost imperceptible caused a little uneasiness. A feeling that was difficult to explain would arise for a few seconds and disappear soon after, drowned out by the need to believe the best in people. Months later, the truth appeared exactly where that quiet feeling had pointed from the beginning. How many times have you ignored this inner voice because you thought that distrusting would be a way to lose your goodness? For Jung, intuition is not born of fear. It is born from the communication between consciousness and the unconscious. The problem is that many empaths have learned to silence this communication to preserve relationships. They spent so many years prioritizing the feelings of others that they failed to listen to their own internal signals. The awakening of the witch represents precisely the reconciliation with this forgotten intelligence. It does not create supernatural abilities. It restores to consciousness what has always been available, but remained hidden by emotional projections. That is why manipulators usually notice this transformation even before the empath itself. They can't explain why, but they feel that something has changed. The old strategies no longer produce the same effect. Guilt no longer controls. The fear of rejection loses strength. Emotional justifications fail to erase the facts. For the first time, the empath listens to the words without abandoning the observation of attitudes. This simple detail completely changes the dynamics of relationships. What once seemed like love begins to reveal dependence. What seemed like friendship shows hidden interests. What seemed to be a concern often hid the need for control. This new perception, however, does not only bring freedom, it also produces a strange feeling of loneliness. When the masks begin to fall, the number of people around often decreases. Some move away because they no longer find room for manipulation. Others disappear because they never knew the real you. They only knew the version that accepted everything in silence. For a while, this emptiness can seem daunting, but Jung reminded us that every initiation requires a period of recollection. Before finding a new way of living, the soul needs to learn to remain alone without confusing solitude with abandonment. But there is an even deeper transformation waiting for the empath. Seeing the truth about others is just the first move on this journey. The real revolution begins when this new gaze stops pointing only to the outside world and starts to illuminate what has remained hidden inside you throughout your life. It is at this moment that the shadow reveals its most startling aspect, and nothing can prepare you for what you will discover next. There is a moment when the greatest danger for the empath ceases to be the manipulator. It seems like a contradictory statement, but Carl Gustav Jung would understand exactly what it means. While we believe that all suffering comes exclusively from the outside world, we remain stuck in the same cycle, only changing the characters in the story. The real break happens when the consciousness realizes that no manipulator would have remained for so long without finding, within their own psyche, an open door. This finding does not serve to generate guilt. It serves to give power back. From that moment on, the question ceases to be, "Who hurt me?" and becomes, "What inside me allowed this wound to repeat itself so many times?" Jung described this phenomenon through the mechanism of projection. What we do not recognize in ourselves tends to be thrown on others. The empath usually projects his own honesty on people. He believes that because he would never do a certain harm, no one around him would be able to do it either. It is an illusion built by purity of intention, not by observation of reality. The manipulator, on the contrary, projects his own strategy onto everyone and imagines that each gesture has a hidden interest. Both live attached to their own projections. One is suspicious of everything, the other believes everything. Neither of them sees the human being as he really is. When the witch archetype awakens, something extraordinary happens. It does not destroy the sensibility of the empath. It removes the veil of projections. For the first time, the heart ceases to command decisions on its own. Intuition starts to walk alongside observation, and compassion meets discernment. It is as if an old library, forgotten in the depths of the unconscious, has finally opened its doors. Every experience lived, every lie discovered, every promise broken, and every limit violated ceases to be just painful memories and becomes knowledge. Pain is no longer just suffering, it becomes wisdom. But allow yourself to reflect for a moment. How many times have you confused hope with evidence? How many people stayed in your life just because you believed their version, ignoring what their attitudes showed on a daily basis? It is precisely here that Jung introduces one of the most profound ideas in all of analytical psychology. That which remains unconscious governs our life, and we call this invisible government fate. The empath believes that he always finds the same type of manipulator by bad luck. However, the repetition reveals another reality. The unconscious incessantly seeks similar situations until a learning is completed. While consciousness is not part of the lesson, life only changes the scenario. The characters are given new names, but they play exactly the same role. Observe how this happens in practice. A person promises to respect your boundaries. For a few weeks, everything seems different. Small signs begin to appear. A disrespectful comment here, a guilt disguised as affection there, a charge presented as a demonstration of love. The former empath would ignore these details to preserve the relationship. The witch does the opposite. She does not react impulsively. She observes. He does not look for evidence to confirm his fears or arguments to justify the behavior of others. It only contemplates the facts. This difference seems small, but it completely alters the destiny of a life. There is a very powerful silence in this process. It is the silence of those who no longer need to convince anyone that they are right. Jung said that true consciousness reduces the need to prove anything to the world. The closer a personality gets to the self, the less energy it wastes trying to control the opinion of others. The awakened empath realizes that arguing incessantly with manipulators only strengthens their psychological game. Instead of responding to every provocation, he learns something infinitely more difficult: to draw his energy from what fuels the conflict. But doesn't seeing everything so clearly make life colder? Does letting go of old illusions mean losing the ability to love or trust again? This is one of the greatest illusions faced during individuation. Many believe that to mature means to harden. Jung never held to this idea. For him, becoming whole is not abandoning the light or embracing the darkness. It is allowing both to take their proper place within consciousness. The witch does not eliminate the empath. It prevents the empath from continuing to walk unarmed through a world where not everyone acts moved by the same principles. Compassion remains alive, but it ceases to be naive. Love continues to exist, but it learns to distinguish reciprocity from dependence. It is at this stage that an almost disconcerting capacity arises. The empath begins to perceive invisible patterns in human relationships. It is not divination or any supernatural phenomenon. It is a mind that has finally ceased to be dominated by desire and has begun to observe the repetition of behaviors. The person who always blames others for everything is unlikely to take responsibility tomorrow. Those who manipulate through guilt will repeat this mechanism whenever they feel a loss of control. Those who promise change without presenting concrete actions will probably continue to offer only words. Jung understood that unconscious complexes function as automatic programs. As long as they are not conscious, they repeat themselves almost mechanically. This perception completely changes the way the empath occupies the spaces of life. Before, he hoped that time would reveal who was trustworthy. Now he understands that time only confirms what the small signs already announced from the beginning. A look, a repeated incoherence, a constant need for control, or a persistent absence of responsibility become far more reliable indicators than any exciting speech. The witch's symbolic third eye is nothing more than a consciousness, trained to perceive that which was previously stifled by emotions. However, there is a price that few imagine. The more consciousness awakens, the less comfortable it becomes to participate in relationships built on masks. Superficial conversations start to tire. False explanations become transparent. Environments loaded with manipulation start to produce an almost physical discomfort. Many interpret this phase as isolation. Jung would see it differently. The soul is reorganizing its energy field so that new connections can emerge. The emptiness that appears is not a punishment. It is the space necessary for that which no longer belongs to your journey to finally withdraw. But there is an even more disturbing discovery waiting for those who cross this path. Once you recognize the patterns of the manipulators and understand your own unconscious mechanisms, there remains a question that is impossible to avoid. What if the greatest prison had never been built by others, but by the identity you created to survive? It is precisely in the face of this revelation that the transformation reaches its most decisive point, because now it will not only be the way of seeing the world that will change, it will be the very person you believed yourself to be all your life. There is an ancient story preserved in different initiatory traditions that says that no traveler passed through the gates of a sacred temple carrying everything he owned. Before entering, he was forced to leave behind weapons, titles, riches, and even his own name. The message was simple: no one can find their true essence while still holding on to an identity built only to survive. Carl Gustav Jung came to the same conclusion by another path. He understood that individuation requires a symbolic death, not the death of the body, but of the personality that has spent years trying to please, avoid conflicts, and win love through sacrifice. The most difficult moment of the empath's journey does not happen when he faces the manipulators.
It happens when he realizes that he needs to abandon the version of himself that he believed to be indispensable. This discovery usually causes a curious phenomenon. Many people report that soon after they start setting healthy boundaries, old acquaintances simply disappear. Invitations dwindle, messages stop coming, and relationships that seemed unshakable and almost without explanation. At first glance, this seems like a loss, but Jung would say that the psyche is naturally reorganizing that which no longer corresponds to the new state of consciousness. What was previously united by unconscious need ceases to find nourishment when that need disappears. It is not persecution. It's not bad luck. It is a silent reorganization of one's life. Researchers of human behavior often observe a similar pattern in relationships marked by emotional dependence. When a single person profoundly alters his or her posture, the entire relational system reacts. Some connections become healthier, others collapse. This is because many relationships are not only sustained by affection, but by invisible roles. There are those who need to save, those who need to be saved, those who control, and those who accept to be controlled. When one of these roles disappears, the artificial balance also disappears. Jung drew attention to this dynamic when he explained that complexes do not belong only to the individual. They also manifest themselves between people, forming true psychological networks. Maybe you've experienced something similar. After learning to say a simple no, someone reacted as if you had committed a huge injustice. The request was small, but the reaction was disproportionate. Why? Because that person was not responding only to the present situation. She was reacting to breaking a pattern that had long benefited her. The former empath would interpret this reaction as a sign of guilt. The awakened consciousness sees something completely different. She realizes that some people have never been bothered by her limits. They were only bothered when they realized that they could no longer overtake them. But there is a detail that almost no one notices. If setting limits produces so much resistance, is the problem really in the limits, or on those who profited from his absence? Jung stated that psychic energy always seeks balance. For years, the empath directed almost all of this energy away from himself. He listened more than he spoke. He understood more than he was understood. He sustained more than he was sustained. When this energy finally returns to its true center, an unexpected sensation is born. Many describe it as peace. Others call it freedom. There are those who report a strange calm, as if a constant noise had disappeared without warning. It didn't happen because the world got kinder. It happened because the soul stopped wasting strength, trying to control what was never under its control. In the alchemical traditions that inspired Jung so much, there is the image of inner fortitude. It is not a construction made of stones, but a consciousness organized in different levels of protection. This metaphor helps to understand why the awakened empath no longer lives reacting to events. He starts to build his life from the inside out. The first wall protects your time. The second preserves your emotional peace. The third one stores its energy. And at the center of it all is what Jung would call the self, the deepest core of the personality, where no manipulation can reach. Imagine an ancient city surrounded by walls. The invaders never reached the castle directly. Before, they faced moats, gates, drawbridges, and successive barriers. In the same way, matured consciousness ceases to allow immediate access to your most intimate space. Not every person who shows sympathy is trusted. Not every declaration of love achieves intimacy. Not every promise deserves credence. This does not mean coldness. It means discernment. The symbolic witch does not close her heart. He simply understands that every treasure needs to be protected. There is another amazing phenomenon that many people describe after this transformation. Manipulators seem to disappear almost spontaneously. Some end contact without any discussion. Others lose interest altogether. Sometimes a single firm answer is enough for years of insistence to end suddenly. This seems unlikely, but it finds an explanation in the psychological dynamics themselves. People who are used to drawing emotional energy look for environments where this dynamic continues to work. When they find someone whose posture
communicates serenity, clarity, and firmness. They intuitively realize that the old game has ceased to exist. Conflict no longer offers reward. Jung never used the language of so-called energies in the way that many modern currents do, but he recognized that personality communicates far beyond words. Gestures, posture, silence, gaze, and presence reveal unconscious contents that others capture, even before any dialogue. The insecure empath conveys unrestricted availability. The empath who has integrated his shadow conveys something different: non-aggressiveness, not superiority.
Just a silent conviction that you know your own worth. This change, although invisible, profoundly alters the quality of the relationships that begin to emerge. However, it is precisely at this point that the greatest risk of the entire journey is born. After experiencing a freedom he never thought possible, the empath may believe that he has finally won the battle, but Jung warned that every inner conquest brings a temptation proportional to the power conquered. The same force that now protects your soul can also feed pride, rigidity, and the illusion of superiority. And it is exactly at this moment that the most difficult test of all begins, because protecting yourself from manipulators is only half the battle. True victory will depend on preventing the shadow itself from transforming your new strength into what once nearly destroyed you. There is an extremely dangerous illusion that accompanies almost every empath after he awakens to his own strength. At first, the feeling is liberating. You finally get to say no without guilt. He no longer feels the need to justify every decision. Manipulators stop taking up space in your life, and the silence, once frightening, turns into peace.
At this point, it seems that the journey is over, but Carl Gustav Jung warned that it is exactly when we believe we have won the battle that the shadow finds its most sophisticated way of acting. She no longer appears dressed in fragility. Now he appears wearing the mask of strength. Analytical psychology teaches that every archetype has two poles. When integrated into consciousness, it becomes a source of balance. When he dominates his personality, he becomes a tyrant. The witch archetype is no exception to this rule. The same clarity that protects the empath can slowly turn into absolute distrust. Discernment can degenerate into constant judgment. Firmness can become rigidity, and serenity can be replaced by a coldness that no longer protects the heart but imprisons it. It is precisely here that many interrupt their individuation without realizing it. Jung called this phenomenon psychic inflation. Consciousness identifies itself so much with a new aspect of personality that it believes it has reached a higher position. The ego begins to confuse lucidity with infallibility. The person comes to believe that he always sees the intentions of others correctly, interprets any mistake as manipulation, and closes all doors even before verifying who really wants to enter. That which was born to liberate ends up building a different but equally powerful prison. Maybe you know someone who has been through this. After suffering numerous disappointments, he became unable to trust anyone. He sees hidden interests in all gestures of kindness. They interpret affection as a strategy, closeness as a threat, and vulnerability as a sign of weakness. Many call this emotional intelligence. Jung would probably do another reading. I would say that this person just exchanged one prison for another. Before, she was a slave to naivety. Now she has become a slave to fear. In both cases, he still does not experience true freedom. Then, an inevitable question arises: how to protect your soul without hardening your heart? How to see the shadow of the manipulators without allowing it to bring out the worst within you? The answer lies in something that Jung repeated throughout his work. Individuation does not consist in eliminating the shadow, but in dialoguing with it continuously. Mature consciousness does not strive to appear perfect. She remains vigilant in the face of her own impulses. The awakened witch knows that there is aggression within her. She knows that she is also capable of controlling, manipulating, or acting out of pride. Precisely because it recognizes this possibility, it prevents these forces from taking command. Those who believe they are completely free from their own darkness are often overwhelmed by it without realizing it. There is an ancient alchemical image that Jung studied with great interest. It depicts a king and queen walking side by side toward the same throne. The king represents reason, firmness, and conscience. The queen symbolizes sensitivity, intuition, and the deep soul. While one tries to rule alone, the kingdom remains divided. Only when both learn to walk together is born what the alchemists called the philosopher's stone, a symbol of human totality. The empath and the witch represent exactly this encounter. Neither of them should destroy the other. Both need to coexist. That is why true strength never screams. She feels no need to prove superiority. The manipulator needs to control because he lives dominated by the fear of losing power. The inflamed ego needs to win arguments because it depends on approval to sustain its identity. Integrated consciousness works in a completely different way. She understands that some battles disappear simply because they stop receiving energy. Silence, in many cases, becomes more transformative than any argument. There are curious reports of people who, after years of studying Jung and starting a deep process of self-knowledge, realized something seemingly improbable. Without changing cities, professions, or social circles, they began to attract completely different people. Conversations became deeper. Relations became more balanced. Old conflicts have lost intensity. This did not happen because the world has changed. It happened because the personality stopped feeding old patterns. When consciousness transforms, what resonates with it also changes. Jung described this type of significant coincidence through the concept of synchronicity, showing that certain inner transformations seem to reorganize, in a surprising way, the lived experience. But there is an indispensable condition for this to happen. The heart cannot close. The witch protects love, but never replaces love. She sets limits, but she does not abandon compassion. He recognizes the suffering of others, but no longer accepts to carry pain that belongs to others. She understands that helping does not mean saving, just as forgiving does not mean remaining available for further abuse. This difference completely changes the quality of human relationships. Perhaps this is the biggest revelation of the entire journey. For years, you believed that to love meant to endure.
Then, he believed that protecting himself meant driving everyone away. Now he is beginning to perceive a third possibility. It is possible to love deeply and at the same time remain whole. It is possible to offer compassion without surrendering one's peace. It is possible to understand someone's pain without allowing that pain to determine their fate. However, Carl Jung insisted that no transformation is complete until consciousness finds its true center.
The witch is not the final destination of the empath. She is only the guardian who leads you to a much deeper place. There is a dimension of the soul where the struggle between light and shadow finally ends, where the force ceases to exist, to fight and comes into existence only to sustain the truth. It is exactly this encounter that awaits the empath in the final stage of the journey, and understanding its meaning will forever change the way you see your own life. We have reached the end of this journey, but perhaps this is actually the first day of your true life. If you followed every step of the way, you probably noticed that this story was never just about an empath, about manipulators, or about the witch archetype.
Carl Gustav Jung never wrote to feed fantasies or create mysterious characters. His mission was much deeper. He wanted to show that every human being carries within himself opposing forces, waiting to be reconciled. As long as a part of the soul remains rejected, the personality will never be complete. And maybe that's exactly what has happened to you for so many years. You believed that you had to choose between being good or being strong, between protecting others or protecting yourself, between loving or setting limits. But Jung demonstrated that this division is only an illusion created by the ego. True transformation happens when we understand that the light needs the shadow to remain conscious, and that the shadow needs the light not to turn into destruction. The empath does not awaken to abandon his essence. He awakens to prevent his essence from continuing to be explored. Look at your own history for a few moments. How many decisions have been made just to prevent someone from being disappointed with you? How many times have you stayed in environments that were already destroying your peace just because you were afraid of seeming selfish? How many nights have you spent trying to understand people who have never made the same effort to understand you? Perhaps these memories still bring pain. Perhaps some of them still provoke guilt. But Carl Jung would teach us that every experience has a function within the journey of individuation. Nothing you have experienced has been wasted. Each disappointment removed an illusion. Each manipulation revealed a limit that needed to be borne. Each loss made room for a truer identity. There is a phrase attributed to Jung's thought that profoundly summarizes this crossing. What you become
aware of becomes freedom. That which remains unconscious continues to govern its destiny. For a long time, its destiny was driven by invisible wounds, by silent fears, and by the constant need to be accepted. Today, however, you know another way. Not because life has promised to eliminate challenges, but because you now know where to find your true strength. She was never in the people who remained by her side. It was never in the approval it was looking for. He was never in the ability to endure everything in silence.
It has always been hidden within the part of you that was waiting to be recognized. From this moment on, there is a simple but profoundly transformative exercise that can change the way you will live the next few days. Before automatically responding to any situation, take a break. Observe your body. Observe your emotions. Ask yourself, is this decision born of love or fear? Am I helping because I chose to help or because I fear being rejected? Am I saying yes out of generosity or because I still have a hard time setting boundaries? This small interruption between impulse and action is one of the greatest gifts that consciousness can offer. It is in this brief space that individuation begins to replace the old automatisms. There is another habit that is equally powerful. At the end of each day, take a few minutes to talk to yourself, not to judge your mistakes, but to observe your standards. Ask which situations have consumed your energy and which have strengthened your peace. Reflect on the people who have awakened serenity and those who have caused constant confusion. Little by little, you will realize that life speaks through repetitions. Jung believed that the soul sends signals continuously. The more attentive we become, the less we need to suffer to learn. It will also be important to accept something that many people resist understanding. Not everyone will stay by your side when you start living authentically. Some relationships will end because they were sustained only by your willingness to compromise. Others will be strengthened precisely because they were built on true respect. Don't be afraid of this process. Nature never keeps dry leaves attached to the branches during the spring. In the same way, the soul needs to let go of what has already fulfilled its role to allow the birth of something new. Perhaps the greatest lesson of this journey is to realize that the witch archetype never emerged to transform the empath into someone cold or unapproachable. Its function has always been to protect what is most sacred, a heart capable of loving without losing its own dignity. Carl Jung understood that the human wholeness is born when we stop fighting against parts of ourselves and begin to integrate them with consciousness. The real victory has never been to destroy the manipulators. It was preventing them from defining who you would be for the rest of your life. If you ever feel afraid of coming across as harsh as you set boundaries, remember this truth. A tree does not fail to offer shade because it has strengthened its roots.
A river does not lose its beauty because it has learned to follow its own course. In the same way, you don't lose your goodness when you learn to protect your peace. On the contrary, only those who are whole can love without abandoning themselves. Only those who know the shadow himself can prevent her from ruling his life.
And only those who have found their own self can walk through the world without having to wear masks to be accepted. Perhaps you started this video believing that you would only hear a reflection on empaths, manipulators, and Carl Jung. But I hope you now understand that this was, above all, a conversation about you, about the person who is emerging after so many years of trying to survive, about the courage to abandon the identity built by pain to finally live the identity built by consciousness. If this transformation has begun within you, preserve it. Feed her daily. Every little limit respected, every choice made with lucidity, and every step taken toward your truth will strengthen this new consciousness. If this message has found an echo in your soul, leave your support in this video. Click on like so that this reflection reaches other people who may be experiencing exactly this, crossing at this moment. Share in the comments which part touched you the most. If you prefer to preserve your privacy, write just a word or comment anonymously on what your heart felt along this journey. Your experience may be the key someone else needed to awaken. And if you are not yet part of this community, subscribe to the channel. Here we will continue to explore, inspired by Carl Gustav Jung, the archetypes, the shadow, individuation, and the deepest paths of self-knowledge, so that each new encounter is another step towards your true inner freedom.